Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a major update regarding the situation with Canada, their election, and also them possibly becoming independent, at least Alberta becoming independent. We've got the huge tariffs. Trump has just announced 25% tariffs on automobiles not produced in the United States. This is critical for Ontario. It is going to hurt their economy. You've already got Doug Ford come out saying he's going to hit America where it hurts, one of the premiers of Canada. And it's just, this is going to end very badly for the Canadians. And we'll have to see. It's a holding period right now with their election. But I wanted to discuss this because the tariffs on Canada, they are big in terms of the idea of some of these provinces seceding from Canada, having a referendum and leaving because of a poor economic environment. And so if you can create that poor environment, that'll foster some negativity towards Canada. And it's like, well, what are we doing still being a part of Canada if you're Alberta, if you're Saskatchewan? There's new numbers that have come out with Polymarket to where they break it down by province. Who are you going to vote for, the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party? And Alberta's at 99% conservative. Saskatchewan's going to be conservative. And even British Columbia, which we know they're liberal, but because of how bad the Liberal Party has been within Canada the past few decades, it's about 50-50 on them. So it's really all of Western Canada that we would want. And Trump has said, well, we want all of Canada, we'll see. But really, we want Western Canada and we want the territories. But we've got stuff on the situation with Alberta. They're not too happy. You've also got this Trump warning the EU and Canada, if they work together to do economic harm to the United States, large-scale tariffs far larger than currently planned will be placed on them both in order to protect the United States. So that was Trump this morning on Truth Social. And yeah, this is something we're seeing where the liberals, there is some similarities between the EU and how liberal they are in Canada and how liberal they are in the United States, potentially alienating Canada to a degree. But if we know with Carney and his ties to the EU, this is going to anger Alberta and Saskatchewan greatly. And this would only push them closer to joining the United States if there was some type of situation to where Carney and the Liberal Party ended up getting majority seats and they became closer and they joined the EU. They did an economic deal with the EU in response to these tariffs. It would just push Alberta and Saskatchewan further away and more into the pro-US camp, or at least pro-independent camp. It seems like right now they're more so hoping to become independent, and then maybe the door will be open to join the United States, although I'm not exactly sure, because it does seem like the people that want to leave Canada, at least half of them, they just want to be independent, and then the other half that want to leave, they want to join the United States. But this can all be worked out with a deal facilitated by the United States to make it viable, and it's just like the Greenland situation. We haven't really offered any province in Canada anything. Trump actually has offered. He's suggested a 1-for-1 Canadian dollar USD exchange, and he hasn't offered Greenland anything except military protection. But he has offered Canadians that, and that was not a official offer, but it was just a starting point to help these people understand. And also, when you talk about Alberta, the amount of resources they have, the Equalization Act they currently pay Eastern Canada every single year, like billions of dollars, they would get to keep that, and we could work it out in terms of their health care. And then it becomes a question, well, do we fast track Alberta to becoming a state, because we would want them in with their 9 electoral votes being Republican? Depending on with the healthcare and some other things, it would probably be a few years they could be fast tracked and they could become a state, as opposed to, well, maybe Saskatchewan could as well. But it does take time to apply for statehood and become and get that granted. But under Trump, I think he could fast track it. But either way, Trump is saying, well, this is the stage right now. But it's not even just Trump who's like, I'm going to put tariffs on the EU and Canada, whatever, if they get closer together. This is Western Canada is going to go further and further apart. Imagine Carney wins and he's already in bed with the EU and he does some type of deal with them. It will really disturb Alberta. And I think at that point they would, if they're already at 37 to 40, I would say they're around 40% of them want to be independent, and about 20% of those people want to join the United States. That's before our offer. That's better than Greenland numbers. And that's just Alberta I'm talking about, not Saskatchewan, not all of Canada. All of Canada, it's like 90-10. They hate America, they hate Trump because they're all liberal, and that's the liberal-infested big cities, Montreal and Quebec City, Toronto, Vancouver, although Vancouver's in British Columbia, we would have to take them on possibly. But if we just took Alberta, it wouldn't be Vancouver. But this is, I mean, listen, if the EU and Canada want to do something, it's just going to push Alberta further away from them, especially with all the climate initiatives they have. And so here is the lawyer who is spearheading the potential separation of Alberta from Canada, Jeffrey Rath, who is talking about this and really lays it all out there. And he says, not in this video clip, I don't think, but he says, if we want to join the United States, I mean, they're open to it. They're open to it. They say the first step, they want to go meet with people in DC, but they say the first step is becoming separate from Canada through a referendum. And so this is how it has to happen. But this is a really good, you should listen to some of this.
So there'd be no more federal income tax. There'd be no GST. There'd be no excise tax. There'd be no carbon tax. There'd be no more equalization payments where taxes, pension, and UI benefits included. We send $70 billion plus a year to Ottawa and get less than $35 billion a year back from the rest of Canada or Confederation. So imagine the wealth and the prosperity of this province with all of that money remaining in the province, remaining in the provincial economy. Imagine Alberta with control of its own immigration, so that where we have cities that don't have enough water, don't have enough electricity, don't have enough housing, that we can say, hang on, no vacancy, time out, until we sort out all the people that are presently here and we accommodate everybody that's here, and have a sensible immigration policy as opposed to what we've been dealing with. Imagine in Alberta where we are no longer being subject to arbitrary federal regulations because somebody in Ottawa doesn't like the shape of somebody's hunting rifle, that they just automatically declare all of our hunting rifles to be prohibited, illegal, and subject to seizure to be shipped to the front lines in the war of Ukraine, and other stupid ideas that have come out of Ottawa in the last several years. So I'm confident on those ideas alone, getting rid of, like literally if we get rid of all federal taxation in Alberta, the take-home pay and the disposable income of every Albertan will more than double. Think about the fact that every time a working man or woman goes to the pump to fill up their truck, instead of paying $1.60 for diesel, they're paying 80 cents, which is what it should be. I mean, all of these things need to be explained to the public at large to truly internalize what the benefits from an economic perspective of an independent Alberta will be. As well as and this is why we're going to Washington to talk to the U.S. administration with regard to their support for Alberta independence.
Yeah, Trump supports Alberta being independent. He hasn't said it publicly, though.
The U.S. perspective, why wouldn't they support U.S. independence or Alberta independence? President Trump recently announced at the joint session of Congress that he was fully in support of self-determination for Greenland. Surely we can hope that President Trump will also support self-determination for Alberta, because clearly it's in the U.S. interest to have a secure energy supply that isn't being subject to arbitrary regulation, production caps, emission caps, and all of these other things that Ottawa arbitrarily imposes on Alberta out of some misguided notion that anything we do in Canada is going to somehow offset all of the CO2 increases being put out by India and China, which dwarf all of our CO2 savings in Alberta and Canada on an annualized basis.
Oh, he's absolutely right, especially when it comes to Canada. We deal with that in the United States. I'm surprised he didn't mention the United States in terms of CO2 emissions, but yeah, they're worried about CO2 emissions in Canada. You could at least argue, they try and argue per capita in the United States when it comes to CO2 emissions. Well, per capita, it's very accurate in terms of crime rate and things like that, but in terms of actual CO2 emission, it's just the environment and just the way warming works. It doesn't really care about who per capita emissions. It's just the total emissions is all that matters. But yeah, they get hit with these carbon taxes and all this stuff. It's like they're contributing like 1/200th of CO2, probably even less than that in comparison to India, where they've got crop burning and they just all surrounding New Delhi. It's just infested with smog, the amount of vehicles, how overpopulated it is. And then nobody in America, they want us to throw like, it's like 93 trillion. Then they said, no, it's only $50 trillion into the Green New Scam, which it's been proven now. A lot of the times they do these climate initiatives. It's all money laundering a lot of the times, because it's the easiest thing. Where's the money actually go in terms of these supposed green initiatives? And should it all be focused on Canada and what they're doing? And we've brought our we've leveled off our CO2. Look at maps and look at the line charts. Under Trump, they got leveled off. So it's like Trump's this big bad guy. They're right. They're dealing with horrible regulations. They need deregulations, and Trump can give them that. But he also says, listen, we know that some people want us to join the United States. We need protection from the U.S. We either have an economic deal with the U.S. or the U.S. annexes Alberta and they can become a territory or a state. We would prefer they become a state because they're conservative. But if they want to be a territory, that's fine as well. But that's all going to have to be negotiated. It's all going to have to be worked out. Now, in looking at the update here, this is just polymarket, which party wins the most seats. This is the most important thing. You can see the Liberal Party, 56% chance. If we want this to happen, meaning Alberta has a referendum, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe there's such a big divide, and I've heard from people in Canada, whether Paul Vier wins or not, there's going to be a huge divide. Western Canada versus Eastern Canada, to where they still might want to leave. But if the Liberal Party wins even by just a hair in terms of total seats, this is going to get seriously real when it comes to Alberta. And I think you also do have, if I look this up, Alberta just in general, like which party wins the most seats in Alberta. You can see, I mean, 97% chance. But I also think if you look up British Columbia, like look at this. British Columbia, and this is because of horrible Liberal leadership, but this is pretty remarkable that it's 50-50 in British Columbia, which is comparable, they say, as a coastal province to a Washington State, to an Oregon, to a California on the coast. It's very liberal. Vancouver's extremely liberal. But even they're at 50-50. So maybe it's not a big deal we take on British Columbia. They're not horribly liberal, but they are liberal. Like this, in an American sense, they absolutely are very liberal. But I'm just saying it's interesting to see this be at this betting to be at 50-50. So this is really like the West versus the East in terms of the West being way more conservative, at least in terms of this election, and then the East with the population being more liberal. And so this is interesting stuff when you talk about even British Columbia possibly splitting it down the middle, not being crazy liberal. You add them on, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. I wanted to add British Columbia. It's part of the Western Arctic Empire and just the Arctic Empire in general, where Trump plans to just fully entrench the United States into the Arctic by already having control of Alaska, and then the territories in northern Canada, those would be purchased via the government of Eastern Canada in a deal. And then also we would have Greenland. And I still think Greenland is the most likely. This depends. Maybe it takes longer. Maybe there still is a movement if the Conservative Party gets the most seats. But if the Liberal Party gets the most seats in this election, it is going to supercharge Alberta possibly being independent. They said that the lawyer says they're going to D.C. We know J.D. Vance going to Greenland. All these things are happening. This takes time, but we're starting to see it really play out with Alberta. And listen, this election is big in terms of this right now, because it could kickstart it. And so we'll have to see what happens, and it could maybe have a referendum, because they said, well, right now, you look at the recent poll, it's 37% say we want to be independent. That's right now, and it could be higher than that, because if you look at that poll, there's about like 12% that say they don't know yet. So it's probably about 40% that probably would like to be independent, and then half of that want to join the United States. Imagine if the Liberal Party wins, that at least I think gets bumped up to 60% want to leave and maybe 40% want to join the United States. And that's before us offering them anything in terms of military protections, in terms of a one-for-one exchange rate, in terms of $2,000, $3,000 per Albertan. So there's a lot that we can offer to get that up even more if the event happens to where they do have a referendum to leave. Because if there's a poll out that says 60 to 70% of them want to leave, if the Liberal Party gets the majority and Carney wins and they get pushed closer to the EU, and this is where it gets pretty real if it happens. And you've also got the tariffs that are really hurting Canada, and they still have their heads in the stand. They're talking about they're going to fight back against the United States. And even the conservative leader, Paul Vier, is saying that what Trump is doing is so horrible, it's bad. And so you just wonder, these people of Alberta and Saskatchewan, and you bring in Manitoba, you bring in British Columbia, and this is really how it plays out. So it's very important to see the results of this election. Maybe in the long run it won't matter. There's still such a huge divide, West versus East, that they'll still want to leave anyways. But in the short term, the results of this election could be very big, depending on it, and especially with some people that are part of this Albertan separation movement, to where they want to be separate of Canada and potentially secede from them and have the option to join the United States, and you get so much protection. You join, and we again, the United States is going to offer some huge things, and we can just become fully energy independent with their natural gas and oil. And they also do have a pretty big technology industries, from what I've heard. So this is all big stuff. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.